Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Sofia Alvarez never imagined that a moment of venting could turn her life upside down. Sitting on the couch in her small living room, still wearing the gray blazer she'd worn to the office, she held her phone in one hand while massaging her temples with the other. The day had been hell. "Luna, you're not going to believe what this man did today," she whispered into the WhatsApp voice message, making sure she was sending it to her best friend. The lamplight cast soft shadows across her tired face, and she didn't even realize how her words carried a dangerous mix of irritation and something else. Nathaniel Carter, just thinking his name, made her stomach flip, and not necessarily for the right reason. He'd arrived at the company just 2 weeks ago as the new executive director, and since then, the workplace had transformed into a silent war zone. "He's impossible, Luna. Impossible," Sofia continued recording, getting up and walking to the window. The city sparkled below, but she barely noticed today. "He rejected my presentation 3 times. 3. And you know what he said? That my work was adequate but not exceptional. Adequate, 2 weeks of hard work, and he calls it adequate." She paused the audio, took a deep breath, and pressed the button again. Her cheeks were flushed, not just from anger, but from a confusion of feelings she refused to admit. "And the worst part, Luna, the worst part is that he's—" Sofia hesitated, biting her lower lip. "He's incredibly attractive. Those blue eyes of his, the way he furrows his brow when he's concentrating, how he fills a room just by walking into it. It's frustrating." The red wine she'd opened to relax was taking effect, loosening her tongue in a way she normally would have controlled. "He's arrogant, controlling, meticulous to the extreme, but my God, he's too gorgeous to be real." Sofia laughed at herself, shaking her head. "I bet he's one of those dominant types, even in bed. You know, that type who looks at you like he can read your every thought? That's how he looks at me during meetings. And I get completely flustered." She returned to the couch, sinking into the soft cushions as she continued her vent. "Today, during the presentation, he was sitting right in front of me, arms crossed, and I swear I felt him analyzing me. Not just my work, Luna. He was analyzing me. The way his eyes traveled across my face when I talked about the quarterly numbers. God, what a disturbing man." Sofia paused again, realizing her heart was racing just from remembering. What kind of confusion was this in her head? And you know what's worse? Everyone in the office has already noticed the tension between us. Mia from accounting even joked today that we looked like 2 gladiators sizing each other up before a fight. Except it's not just professional tension, Luna. There's something more, something that makes me nervous and excited at the same time. She ran her hand through her hair, undoing the bun she'd kept all day. The dark strands fell over her shoulders, and she felt a little freer. I should hate him. I should. But instead, I keep thinking about him, imagining what it would be like if all this tension exploded in a completely different way. If, instead of arguing about reports, he cornered me in his office. Sofia stopped abruptly, laughing at herself. "Listen to what I'm saying. This man is going to drive me crazy." She looked at her phone, seeing she'd already recorded almost 3 minutes of venting. Luna was going to love this whole mess. Anyway, girl, I needed to get this off my chest with someone before I exploded. Tomorrow, I have to face him again. And I just hope I can keep my composure, because one thing I know. Nathaniel Carter is the type of man who will either promote me or completely destroy me. And right now, I don't know which of those 2 options scares me more. Sofia finished the audio, and without thinking much, went straight to the send button. She was tired. The wine had lowered her defenses, and she just wanted to send that confession to her friend before she regretted it. But the moment the audio was sent, something froze in her stomach. She looked at her phone screen, and her world collapsed. The name at the top of the conversation didn't say Luna, best friend. It said Executive Team Carter and Associates. Sofia felt all the blood drain from her face. Her hands started trembling uncontrollably as she stared at the screen, hoping it was just a nightmare. But it wasn't. The audio was there, in the work group, in the group where all her colleagues were, the managers, the directors, and Nathaniel Carter. "No, no, no, no," she repeated like a mantra, frantically trying to press the audio to delete it, but it was already too late. The small blue symbol next to the message indicated that several people had already listened to it. Her phone started buzzing with messages. First 1, then 2, then an avalanche of notifications she didn't have the courage to open. Sophia threw her phone on the couch as if it were on fire and covered her face with her hands. What had she done? 3 minutes of intimate confession, including comments about her boss's appearance, speculations about his sex life, and admissions about her own attraction to him. All of this accidentally sent to everyone. Sophia stood up unsteadily, feeling her legs go weak. Tomorrow, she would have to face each one of those people. She would have to look Nathaniel Carter in the eyes, knowing he had heard every word of that embarrassing audio. The phone kept buzzing relentlessly on the couch, as if it were mocking her. Sophia knew she needed to see the damage, but part of her just wanted to run away, change cities, maybe countries. But as she stared at that cursed device, a more terrifying question began to form in her mind. What was Nathaniel Carter thinking at this exact moment? Was he listening to the audio for the first, second, or third time? And more importantly, what would happen when she faced him tomorrow morning? Sophia hadn't slept a wink. Sitting on the edge of her bed at 6:00 the morning, she stared at her bedroom mirror with deep, dark circles under her eyes and her stomach in knots. She'd spent the entire night alternating between panic attacks and desperate attempts to create a survival strategy for the day that awaited her. Her phone had been in airplane mode since 11 the night before. After seeing 17 unread messages in the company group, including laughing emojis, surprised faces, and an ominous, "We need to talk, North Carolina," she simply couldn't take it anymore. "Nathaniel Carter," she murmured to her reflection, trying to practice an expression of professional dignity. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. About yesterday," she shook her head, frustrated. There was no way to sound natural after what had happened. The cold shower didn't help reduce the heat of shame rising up her neck. While choosing her outfit, Sophia opted for the most serious blazer she had, navy blue, formal, almost like armor against the stares she knew awaited her. She needed all the protection she could get. The journey to the office felt like a walk to the gallows. Each step made her more tense, each breath more difficult. When the elevator doors opened on the 12th floor, Sophia felt like she was entering an arena full of lions. The silence that greeted her was worse than any screaming would have been. "Good morning, Sophia," said Ethan from finance, barely containing a smile while pretending to shuffle through papers. His voice carried a poorly disguised amusement that made her stomach sink even further. "Good morning," she replied with the firmest voice she could muster, keeping her head high as she walked toward her desk. But she could feel all eyes glued to her, muffled whispers and nervous giggles echoing through the office. Mia from accounting approached with an expression of fake concern. "Sophia, honey, are you okay today? You seem a bit tense." Mia's overly sweet tone made Sophia realize that everyone was savoring every second of her embarrassment. She forced a professional smile. "I'm fine, thank you. Just focused on today's work." "Oh yes, work," Mia continued, clearly not intending to make things easier. "Speaking of which, did you see that Mr. Carter sent a message to the group last night? Something about a general meeting this morning." Sophia felt her blood freeze. A general meeting. Nathaniel was going to talk about the audio in front of everyone. Of course he was, probably to establish policies about professional communication or to make an example out of her. "No," she replied dryly. "I didn't see it." The rest of the morning passed in slow motion. Sophia tried to focus on emails, but the words danced on the screen. Her colleagues passed by her desk more frequently than usual, always with flimsy excuses to start conversations that clearly aimed to extract more details about her situation. At 10:30, the email arrived. "General meeting, conference room, 11:10 a.m. Attendance mandatory. N. Carter." Sophia read and reread the message, looking for clues about what awaited her. The formal tone was even more intimidating than a direct confrontation would have been. When the time came, the conference room was packed. Sophia chose a chair in the back, trying to become invisible, but she could feel the curious stares from all her colleagues. Some didn't even try to hide their anticipation for what was coming. Then Nathaniel walked in. Sophia had never paid so much attention to his details as she did in that moment. The dark gray suit that perfectly molded his athletic body, the blue tie that brought out his penetrating blue eyes, the dark hair slightly tousled, as if he'd run his hands through it, a habit she'd mentioned in that damned audio. He didn't look directly at her, but Sophia could swear that her presence in the room had been registered and catalogued by those analytical eyes. "Good morning, everyone," Nathaniel said, his deep voice filling the space with natural authority. "Thank you for attending on such short notice." Sophia held her breath. "As you know, We're in a crucial phase of company expansion. The next few months will be determining factors for our success, and this requires the highest level of professionalism and focus from all of us." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the room. Sophia felt drops of sweat forming on her forehead. "Therefore, I'll be implementing changes in the supervision structure. Some of you will receive closer monitoring to ensure we're reaching our maximum potential." Nathaniel began walking around the room, his hands clasped behind his back, and Sophia could feel the tension in the air increasing with each step. "Mia Thompson, you'll work directly with our new HR manager on upcoming projects." Mia nodded, visibly relieved not to be the target. "Ethan Rivera, you'll be relocated to the internal audit team." Sophia closed her eyes, knowing her name would be called any moment. When Nathaniel stopped walking, she opened her eyes and found him looking directly at her for the first time. Those blue eyes studied her for a moment that seemed eternal. There was something there, an intensity she couldn't decipher. Anger, amusement, curiosity. "Sophia Alvarez," he said, and his voice seemed lower, more controlled than before. "Starting today, you'll work under my direct supervision. All your projects will go through my personal approval before moving forward." The silence in the room was deafening. Sophia could hear her own heartbeat as she tried to process what she'd just heard. Direct supervision. Nathaniel Carter would be her direct supervisor. "Any questions about these changes?" Nathaniel asked the room, but his eyes remained fixed on Sophia for another moment before looking away. No one dared to speak. "Excellent. Sophia, please come to my office in 15 minutes. We have a lot to discuss about your upcoming projects." With that, Nathaniel left the room, leaving behind a silence charged with expectation and speculation. Sophia remained seated, trying to control her breathing, as her colleagues began to get up and leave, many casting curious glances in her direction. Mia passed by her on the way out and whispered, "Good luck." But the tone suggested Sophia would need much more than luck. Alone in the conference room, Sophia finally allowed the reality of what had happened to settle in. Nathaniel hadn't mentioned the audio directly, hadn't humiliated her publicly. Instead, he'd created a situation where they would have to work together closely every day. The question that tormented her was no longer whether he had heard the audio. It was obvious he had. The real question was, what exactly did Nathaniel Carter intend to do with the information he now possessed about her? And why, despite all the embarrassment and nervousness, did a treacherous part of Sophia feel a dangerous excitement about the idea of working so closely with him? 15 minutes. That was all the time she had to prepare for the confrontation that would define not just her career, but perhaps something much deeper and more complicated. Sophia knocked lightly on Nathaniel's office door, her fingers trembling imperceptibly against the dark wood. When she heard the deep, controlled come in from the other side, she took a deep breath and turned the handle. The office was exactly as she'd imagined it would be. Impeccable, organized, and intimidating. Bookshelves lined with business books aligned perfectly, a polished mahogany desk without a single mark, and 2 leather armchairs that looked more like interrogation instruments than office furniture. Nathaniel was standing behind the desk, flipping through a report. He didn't look up immediately, leaving Sophia standing there, absorbing every detail of that tension-charged moment. "Sit down," he finally said, indicating one of the armchairs with a casual nod of his head. Sophia approached and sat down, crossing her legs and trying to project a confidence she was far from feeling. Nathaniel finally looked at her, and she had to fight the urge to shift in her chair under that penetrating blue scrutiny. "Sophia," he began, setting the report aside and leaning against the edge of the desk. The position placed him slightly above her, a psychological advantage she was sure he had calculated. "I think we need to establish some parameters for our new working partnership." The word partnership came out with a subtle inflection that made something stir in Sophia's stomach. He knew. Of course he knew about the audio. And he was playing with her like a cat with a mouse. "Of course," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'm ready for any challenge you deem necessary." An almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of Nathaniel's mouth. "Challenge. Interesting word choice." He moved away from the desk and began walking slowly around the room. "I'm going to be very clear about my expectations. I don't accept adequate work. As I mentioned previously, excellence is non-negotiable." Sophia felt her cheeks warm at the reference to the meeting where he had criticized her work. The same criticism that had generated her disastrous vent. "Your reports will need to be rewritten completely." He stopped in front of the window, looking down at the city below. "Your visual presentation needs refinement, and your ability to maintain focus during meetings needs to be drastically improved. The last observation made Sophia straighten in her chair. Excuse me, but I need to disagree. My focus during meetings has always been, she paused, searching for the right word, professional. The air between them became electrified. Sophia could feel that they were no longer talking just about work, and the intensity in his gaze confirmed her suspicions. My behavior has always been completely professional, she said, lifting her chin defiantly. Interesting. Nathaniel resumed walking, his hands clasped behind his back. Because I have the impression that your mind sometimes wanders during our interactions. Sophia felt her heart race. He was definitely playing with her, using the knowledge he had to test her in ways that bordered on inappropriate. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice gaining a firmness she didn't know she possessed. If you have any specific concerns about my work, I'd like you to be direct. Word games don't help me improve professionally. Nathaniel stopped walking and looked at her with what she could swear was admiration. Word games? He repeated slowly. Is that what you think I'm doing? I don't know what you're doing, Sophia replied, standing up from the armchair. If he was going to play psychological games, she wasn't going to make it easier by staying in a disadvantaged position. But I know I have work to do. So, if you could be specific about your expectations, very well. Nathaniel approached her, stopping at a distance that was technically professional but still made Sophia feel the heat emanating from his body. I want reports rewritten by Friday. I want your presentations revised with new templates, and I want you to demonstrate that you can maintain composure under pressure. Pressure? Sophia asked, hating how her voice sounded slightly shaky. Yes, pressure. His eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made Sophia momentarily forget how to breathe. Because I'm going to be watching your performance very closely. Very closely. Sophia swallowed hard, fighting to maintain eye contact. And if I don't meet your expectations, then we'll have to find alternative methods of motivation. The phrase hung in the air between them, loaded with deliberate ambiguity that made Sophia wonder if she was imagining the multiple layers of meaning. I understand, she said finally, surprising herself with her own boldness in not backing down from that dangerous game. And when can I expect to receive feedback on my progress? Nathaniel smiled. A genuine smile this time, which completely transformed his face and made Sophia understand why she had called him devastatingly attractive in that fateful audio. Daily. I'll be checking your work every day. Personally. In the following days, Nathaniel kept his promise with a dedication that bordered on obsession. Sophia could barely finish an email without him appearing at her desk, leaning over her shoulder to check her progress. His masculine cologne, something between wood and spices, became a constant in her personal space. This paragraph needs to be rewritten, he would say, his index finger almost touching hers as he pointed to the screen. The language is too passive, or, your font is inconsistent on this slide. Attention to detail, Sophia. Each correction, each criticism was delivered with a professional calm that somehow intensified the tension between them. Sophia began to notice a pattern. Nathaniel found flaws in things she knew were correct, created opportunities to get physically closer, and always watched her with those analytical blue eyes. On Thursday, when he rejected her third version of a report she was certain was perfect, Sophia finally understood what was happening. It wasn't just supervision. It was provocation. Mr. Carter, she said when he moved away from her desk after another round of nitpicky criticism, can I speak with you privately? He stopped, turned slowly, and she saw something gleam in his eyes. Expectation? Amusement? Of course. My office. 5 minutes. When Sophia entered the office this time, she felt a different determination coursing through her veins. Nathaniel was sitting behind the desk, but there was something in his posture that suggested he had been waiting for exactly this moment. Do you have some problem with me? She asked without preamble, closing the door behind her. Problem? Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, his fingers interlaced over his chest. Why do you ask? Because your criticisms of my work are becoming increasingly creative, finding errors in perfect spacing, questioning word choices that are completely appropriate, asking for revisions on things you approved yourself yesterday. Nathaniel didn't deny it. Instead, he stood up and walked until he was in front of her, that mysterious smile playing on his lips again. And what do you think that means? Sophia felt a wave of courage fueled by days of accumulated tension. I think you're enjoying watching me struggle to impress you. And does that bother you? The question was simple, but the way he asked it, with his voice lower, his eyes fixed on hers, his body slightly leaning toward her, completely transformed the atmosphere of the room. Sophia realized she had reached a point of no return. She could back down, maintain the professional facade, and continue that cat-and-mouse game, or she could be honest about what she was really feeling. "No," she admitted, her voice coming out huskier than she intended. "It doesn't bother me as much as it should." Nathaniel took a step forward, eliminating almost all the space between them. Sophia could see every detail of his face now. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the laugh lines around his eyes, the way his lips curved slightly when he was about to say something important. "Sophia," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "do you have any idea what you're doing to me?" But before she could answer, before she could fully process the admission he had just made, his phone rang, breaking the spell of the moment. Nathaniel closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to compose himself, then moved away to answer the call. Sophia stood there, her heart beating like a war drum, realizing that everything had changed between them, and she had no idea what would happen next. Sophia couldn't concentrate for the rest of the day after the interruption in Nathaniel's office. The phone call had lasted 20 minutes, and when he hung up, he simply said, "We'll talk later." In a voice that had recovered all its professional coldness, she left that office more confused than when she'd entered. Now, on Friday morning, Sophia was at the limit of her patience. Nathaniel had rejected her report again, this time claiming the margins were slightly inconsistent, and she knew something needed to be said before she exploded completely. The office was in its usual weekend routine when Sophia decided she couldn't take it anymore. Ethan had left early. Mia was on an endless call with suppliers, and most colleagues had left their posts. It was the perfect opportunity for a confrontation that was already 3 days overdue. Sophia saved her work, took a deep breath, and marched determinedly toward Nathaniel's office. This time, she didn't even bother to knock. She opened the door and entered like a hurricane. Nathaniel was standing near the window, talking on the phone in a low voice. Seeing her enter unannounced, he murmured something about calling back and hung up. "Sophia," he said, turning to face her. "I don't remember having stop," she interrupted, raising her hand. "Just stop with this professional politeness charade. We both know what's happening here." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow, but Sophia could see something igniting in his eyes. "Clarify that for me." "You're deliberately sabotaging me," Sophia exclaimed, her voice echoing in the silent room. 3 days of impossible criticism, unnecessary revisions, and this constant observation of every move I make. "I thought you said you didn't mind my attention," Nathaniel replied calmly. But there was a tension in his jaw that Sophia hadn't noticed before. "Attention?" Sophia laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Is that what you call what you're doing? Because I'd call it psychological torture." "Torture?" Nathaniel took a step toward her, his eyes narrowing. "That's interesting, coming from someone who spent 3 minutes describing in intimate detail what she thinks about me to the entire company." Finally, the truth was on the table. Sophia felt blood rush to her face, but instead of backing down, she stepped forward, too. "So, that's it. Revenge. You're humiliating me because I had the audacity to find you attractive." "Humiliating?" Nathaniel gave a dry laugh. "Sophia, if I wanted to humiliate you, I would have fired you on the first day. What I'm doing is quite different." "Then explain it to me," she shouted, her composure finally shattering. "Explain to me why you're doing this to me, why you're torturing me with this constant proximity, these impossible criticisms, these looks that seem like you can read my soul." Nathaniel was silent for a moment, watching her with an intensity that made Sophia feel like she was catching fire from the inside. "You want to know why?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "Because, since I heard that audio, I can't think about anything else. Because you managed to put into words exactly what I felt but refused to admit." Sophia blinked, trying to process what she just heard. "What did you say?" Nathaniel moved closer, now just 1 step away. "You called me controlling, arrogant, and you were right. But you also said I was attractive, that I was probably dominant in bed, and that it excited you, and that, Sophia, that changed everything." Sophia's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Nathaniel, no," he continued, his voice gaining an urgency she'd never heard before. "You started this confession. Now you're going to hear me finish it. You think I'm sabotaging you. I'm testing you, testing to see if you can maintain that professional composure when I'm around, testing to see if you feel the same tension I feel every time we're in the same room." Sophia felt like the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. "And what was the result of your test?" Nathaniel smiled, not that calculated professional smile, but something genuine and dangerous. You just exploded in my office, accusing me of psychological torture, and yet, you're still here, half a meter away, looking at me like you want me to do exactly what you described in that audio. Sophia opened her mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come out because he was right. Despite all the frustration, all the anger she felt, there was a part of her that delighted in this proximity, in the electric tension that hung between them. "You can't say that," she murmured, but without any real conviction. "Can't I?" Nathaniel took another step, now so close that Sophia could feel the heat emanating from his body. "Then, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't spend nights thinking about me. Tell me that when I lean over your desk to check your work, you don't imagine what would happen if I got a little closer." Sophia stared at him, feeling like she was on the edge of a precipice. A rational part of her mind screamed for her to back away, maintain professional distance, deny everything. But a much larger, much more honest part was tired of pretending. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're sexy, ridiculously sexy, and it irritates me more than it should, because I know you know exactly the effect you have." Nathaniel closed his eyes for a moment, as if her words were a physical blow. When he opened them again, there was something wild there that made Sophia tremble. "Sophia," he said, his voice hoarse, "do you have any idea how many times I had to control myself this week? How many times I wanted to corner you at your desk and show you exactly how right you were about me?" The air between them was charged with such intense tension that Sophia felt like she could touch it. They were navigating dangerous waters, crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. "So why didn't you?" she challenged, surprising herself with her own boldness. Nathaniel gave a low laugh, almost a growl. "Because when I touch you, Sophia, it won't be in a moment of anger or frustration. It'll be because you asked me to. It'll be because you admitted you want it as much as I do." Sophia felt her legs go weak. "And if I admit it now?" He leaned slightly toward her, his lips almost touching her ear. "Then you'd have to live with the consequences of that admission." Sophia closed her eyes, feeling his warm breath against her skin. Everything in her screamed to take the next step, to close the distance between them and turn all that tension into something concrete. But before she could find the courage to speak, the office door opened abruptly. "Mr. Carter, sorry to interrupt," but Mia stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she saw the proximity between Sophia and Nathaniel. The two immediately stepped apart, but the damage was done. Mia had seen everything, the intimate proximity, the palpable tension, the way they were looking at each other. I can come back later," Mia stammered, clearly savoring every second of catching them. "No need," Nathaniel said, his voice recovering its professional coldness with impressive speed. Sophia was just leaving. Sophia looked at him one last time, seeing how he had instantly composed himself, as if the last few minutes hadn't happened. But there was something in his eyes, an unspoken promise that the conversation was far from over. "Yes," she said, finding her own professional voice, "I'm leaving." As Sophia passed Mia, she could see the malicious gleam in her colleague's eyes. By Monday, the entire office would know that something had happened between her and Nathaniel, but for the first time in days, Sophia found she didn't care, because finally, after all that tension and games, she had confirmation that she wasn't imagining things. Nathaniel Carter wanted her as much as she wanted him, and now it was just a matter of time until one of them had enough courage to do something about it. Monday arrived, loaded with curious stares and poorly disguised whispers. Mia had kept her unspoken promise, and Sophia could feel the weight of all her colleagues' speculation about what had really happened in Nathaniel's office on Friday. She was trying to keep her head down and focus on work when the email arrived. "Business trip, Miami. Departure Wednesday. Meetings with strategic investors. Your presence is mandatory. Prepare presentations on regional growth. N. Carter." Sophia read the email 3 times, her stomach doing somersaults. A business trip alone with Nathaniel after everything that had happened between them. She looked up and saw him through the glass walls of his office, talking on the phone. As if sensing her gaze, Nathaniel turned his head, and their eyes met. Even from a distance, Sophia could feel the intensity of that blue stare. He nodded slightly, a silent confirmation, before returning his attention to the call. On Wednesday, Sophia found herself at the airport at 6:00 the morning with a small suitcase and nerves on edge. Nathaniel was already at the executive terminal, impeccable in a navy blue suit that brought out his eyes, checking emails on his phone. "Good morning," he said when she approached, his voice formally courteous. as if they were just work colleagues on a routine trip. "Good morning," she replied, trying to match his professional tone. The flight to Miami was a lesson in contained tension. They were in business class, seated side by side. But Nathaniel maintained a respectful distance, focusing on his documents while Sophia pretended to read a book she'd brought. But Sophia was hyper-aware of his every movement, the way he drummed his fingers when he was thinking, how he ran his hand through his hair when he leaned over to get water. The masculine cologne she'd learned to associate with those moments of dangerous proximity in the office. "Nervous?" Nathaniel asked softly when the plane hit some light turbulence. Sophia looked at him, realizing he'd noticed how she was gripping the armrest. "A little, about the flight or the trip." There was something in the way he asked the question that made her understand they weren't talking about turbulence. "Both," she admitted honestly. Nathaniel studied her for a moment, and she saw something soften in his expression. "Sophia, this trip is important for the company. The investors we're meeting could change the future of Carter and Associates. I need you to be focused." "I will be," she said, finding her professional determination. "I won't let other things interfere with work." "Other things," he repeated, and there was a touch of humor in his voice. "Is that what we're calling it?" Sophia felt her cheeks warm, but managed to maintain eye contact. "What would you prefer to call it?" Nathaniel leaned slightly toward her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I prefer not to name things until I'm sure what they really are." The hotel in Miami was luxurious, the kind of place Sophia had only seen in magazines. The gleaming marble lobby, strategically positioned palm trees, the stunning ocean view through panoramic windows, everything screamed sophistication and money. "2 rooms, please," Nathaniel said to the reception attendant. "Reservation unter Karte." Sophia stepped back slightly while he handled check-in, admiring the hotel's Art Deco decoration. When Nathaniel approached with the keys, she noticed he seemed slightly tense. "Any problem?" she asked. "Small hiccup," he said, handing one of the keys to her. They only had one room available on the executive floor. "You'll be on the 15th floor. I'm on the 12th. Sophia nodded, trying to ignore the small pang of disappointment. Relief? She wasn't sure which feeling was stronger. "Meetings start tomorrow at 9. Nathaniel continued as they waited for the elevator. "Dinner tonight is optional, but it would be good if you showed up." Informal networking with some of the investors. When they reached the 12th floor and the doors opened, Nathaniel hesitated for a moment before getting out. "Sophia," he said, turning to face her. "Whatever happens in Miami stays in Miami," she completed, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Nathaniel looked at her intently. "Is that what I was going to say?" The elevator doors began to close, and Sophia pressed the button to keep them open. "Wasn't it?" "No," Nathaniel said simply, and stepped out of the elevator, leaving Sophia alone with a racing heart and 1,000 unanswered questions. Sophia's room was stunning, a suite with an ocean view, a private balcony, and a king-size bed that seemed too big for one person. She spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for dinner, changing clothes 3 times before settling on a navy blue dress that was elegant without being provocative. The hotel restaurant was packed when Sophia went down at 7. Nathaniel was already there, talking to a gray-haired man and an impeccably dressed blonde woman. When he saw her approaching, something changed in his expression, a subtle appreciation that made Sophia suddenly very conscious of every step she took. "Sophia," Nathaniel said when she joined the group, "I'd like you to meet Robert Garcia and Victoria Mendez from Miami Investment Group." The evening passed in a mix of business conversations, red wine, and an underlying tension between Sophia and Nathaniel that she hoped the others didn't notice. Nathaniel was charming with the investors, professional, but Sophia noticed how his eyes constantly sought her across the table. When Victoria excused herself to take a call and Robert went to the bar to get another round of drinks, Sophia and Nathaniel were momentarily alone. "You're doing well," he said quietly, leaning slightly toward her. "Robert was impressed with your analysis of the Southeast market." "Thank you," Sophia replied, very aware of how close he was, how she could feel the heat from his body. "It's a project I've been working on for months." "I know," Nathaniel said, and there was something in his voice that made her look at him more carefully. "I know because I've read every report you've written, every analysis, every presentation." Sophia felt her breath catch. "Nathaniel, you're brilliant," he continued, his eyes fixed on hers. "I always knew that. But now, seeing you here in this element, you're magnificent." Before Sophia could respond, Robert returned with the drinks, and the moment broke, but something had changed in the air between them. A line had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. The rest of dinner passed in a fog of professional conversations and loaded glances. When they finally said goodbye to the investors and walked together to the elevators, Sophia felt like she was walking toward the inevitable. "Thank you," Nathaniel said when they were alone in the elevator. "Tonight was perfect." "It was work," Sophia replied, but her voice came out huskier than she intended. "Was it?" Nathaniel turned to face her completely, because to me, it felt like much more than that. The elevator reached the 12th floor, and the doors opened, but neither of them moved. Sophia could hear her own heart beating in the silence stretching between them. "Sophia," Nathaniel said, his voice barely a whisper, "if you go up to your room now, I can pretend that tonight was just about business. I can pretend I didn't notice how you looked at me during dinner, or how my desire to touch you is becoming impossible to ignore." Sophia felt like all the air had been sucked from her lungs. "And if I don't go up?" Nathaniel took a step toward her, his blue eyes dark with desire. "Then we stop pretending." Sophia looked at him, at the man who had been her obsession and her frustration, her fantasy and her torment. She looked at the future that could unfold if she made the safe choice, and at the tempting unknown that awaited her if she was brave. The elevator doors began to close again, and this time Sophia didn't press the button to stop them. Instead, she took a step toward Nathaniel, closing the distance between them once and for all. "Then let's stop pretending," she whispered. Sophia woke up the next morning with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation coursing through her veins. The previous night had ended with them walking together to Nathaniel's room, but at the last minute he had stopped at the door, looking at her with an intensity that made her tremble. "Not like this," he had said, his voice rough with restraint. "When this happens between us, Sophia, I want to be sure it's what you really want, not just a decision made in the heat of the moment." He had kissed her forehead softly, a gesture so tender and unexpected that it had made her heart almost stop, before murmuring good night and entering his room, leaving Sophia confused and even more wanting in the hallway. Now, wearing a light gray suit that made her feel professional and confident, Sophia was preparing to face Nathaniel again. Would it be awkward? Would it be embarrassing? How were they going to pretend nothing had happened when everything had happened? The lobby was busy when Sophia went down for breakfast. Nathaniel was already there, talking to Victoria Mendez and a man Sophia didn't recognize. Young, well-dressed, with a charming smile that he was directing straight at Victoria. Victoria waved when she saw her approaching. "Perfect timing. I want you to meet Diego Salazar from Salazar Holdings." "Diego. This is Sofia Alvarez, the brilliant analyst I told you about yesterday." Diego immediately stood up. He extended his hand with a warm smile. "Sophia, the pleasure is all mine. Victoria hasn't stopped praising your presentation yesterday." Sophia shook his hand, immediately noticing how Diego was attractive in a classic way. Perfectly styled dark hair, warm brown eyes, a smile that probably melted hearts wherever he went. From the corner of her eye, she saw Nathaniel straighten slightly in his chair. "Thank you," Sophia replied graciously. "Victoria is very kind." "Join us," Diego insisted, pulling out a chair for her. "I was just asking about your Brazilian market analysis. I'm considering some investments in the region." Sophia sat down, very aware of how Nathaniel was watching the interaction. There was something in his posture, a stiffness she hadn't seen before, that made her realize he wasn't comfortable with the attention Diego was giving her. "The Brazilian market has immense potential," Sophia began, automatically switching into professional mode, especially in the technology and financial services sectors. Diego leaned slightly toward her, clearly interested. "Fascinating. You must know the culture very well, too, being Brazilian." "I do," Sophia confirmed, smiling. Across the table, she saw Nathaniel tighten his fingers slightly around his coffee cup. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation over lunch," Diego suggested, his smile becoming more intimate. "I know an incredible restaurant on the beach, perfect view, exceptional food." "What a great idea," Victoria interrupted before Sophia could respond. "Nathaniel, do you and Sophia have plans for lunch?" Nathaniel finally spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "We have a meeting at 2 with the development team. Sophia needs to prepare." "Oh, what a shame," Diego said, but didn't seem discouraged. "How about drinks tonight? There's a bar on the terrace with an incredible sunset view." Sophia felt the tension emanating from Nathaniel, like heat waves. It was almost tangible now, and she began to realize what was happening. Nathaniel was jealous, and a mischievous part of her found that intriguing. "A drink would be great," she heard herself saying, surprising even herself. "Jura." Diego's smile widened. "Perfect. Meet Atsu. 7 is perfect, Sophia confirmed, avoiding looking directly at Nathaniel, though she could feel his eyes burning in her direction. The rest of breakfast passed in a charged atmosphere. Nathaniel contributed to the conversation when necessary, but Sophia could feel his growing irritation every time Diego directed a particularly charming comment at her. When they finally got up to go to the day's first meeting, Nathaniel murmured low in her ear, "We need to talk." "About what?" Sophia asked innocently, though her heart was racing. "You know about what," he replied, his voice loaded with tension she'd never heard before. The morning meeting was a success. Sophia presented her analyses with confidence. Nathaniel added strategic insights, and the investors seemed genuinely impressed with the expansion proposal, but beneath the surface professionalism, Sophia could feel the storm building between her and Nathaniel. During a break, Nathaniel pulled her to a more secluded corner of the hotel. "What are you doing?" he asked without preamble. "Networking?" Sophia replied, keeping her voice innocent. "Networking?" Nathaniel repeated, his voice low and dangerous. "Is that what you call flirting with Diego Salazar?" Sophia felt a wave of satisfaction seeing that she'd managed to get to him. "I wasn't flirting. I was being professional." "Professional," Nathaniel said, stepping closer. "Professional is accepting an invitation for drinks with a man who is clearly interested in more than your knowledge about the Brazilian market." "What if he is?" Sophia challenged, lifting her chin. "Diego is attractive, successful, and he's being very nice to me." Something dangerous gleamed in Nathaniel's eyes. "Sophia, what?" "Nathaniel," she interrupted, her own frustration finally finding an outlet. "You spent weeks provoking me, testing me, creating this impossible tension between us. Last night, you took me to your room door and then left me in the hallway like a rejected teenager. What exactly did you expect me to do?" Nathaniel stared at her for a long moment, and Sophia saw a battle being fought behind those blue eyes. "I expected you to understand that when I said I wanted to be sure, it was because this means something to me." "And what does it mean?" Sophia asked, feeling like she was on the verge of an important revelation. "It means that Nathaniel stopped, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "It means I can't stand the thought of another man touching you." The raw, honest admission hit Sophia like a punch to the stomach. All her artificial bravado disappeared, replaced by a sudden understanding of the depth of what was happening between them. "Nathaniel," she began, but he was already pulling away. "Enjoy your drink," he said, his voice cold again. "Just remember, we have an early flight tomorrow." The rest of the day passed in a fog of tense meetings and avoided glances. Sophia tried to focus on work, but her mind kept returning to the expression on Nathaniel's face when he admitted his jealousy. At 7 sharp, she was at the terrace bar, wearing a red dress she'd brought, hoping for a special occasion. Diego was already there, looking as charming as always, with a reserved table with a perfect ocean view. "Sophia," he said, standing up to pull out her chair. "You look stunning." "Thank you," she replied, trying to get into the spirit of the evening, but her mind remained elsewhere. Diego was a perfect companion, attentive, funny, genuinely interested in her opinions. He ordered a bottle of champagne, told amusing stories about his travels around the world, and made Sophia laugh in a way she hadn't been able to for weeks. But even so, she found herself looking for Nathaniel at the bar, wondering where he was, what he was doing. "Can I make a confession?" Diego said after an hour, leaning slightly toward her. "Sure," Sophia replied, though part of her was afraid of what he was going to say. "When Victoria told me about you yesterday, she mentioned you were brilliant, but she didn't mention how beautiful you are. I haven't been able to get you out of my head since this morning." Sophia felt her cheeks warm. Diego was sincere, she could see it in his eyes. Under other circumstances, she would be flattered, maybe even interested. But now, "Diego, you're very kind." But Sophia, the deep, familiar voice behind her, made Sophia turn instantly. Nathaniel was there, looking devastatingly attractive in a white dress shirt and dark pants, but his expression was stormy. "Nathaniel," she said, her heart immediately accelerating. "What are you doing here?" "Interrupting," he said simply, his eyes moving from Sophia to Diego. "Diego, right? I need to speak with Sophia. It's urgent." Diego looked confused but polite. "Of course, but maybe you could." "Now," Nathaniel interrupted, his voice making it clear it wasn't a suggestion. Sophia could feel the tension radiating from Nathaniel in almost visible waves. Part of her wanted to stay, continue provoking him, but there was something in his eyes, a desperate intensity that made her stand up. "Sorry, Diego," she said softly. "Can we continue this later?" Diego nodded graciously, but Sophia could see he had understood the real dynamic of the situation. "Of course. I hope it's really urgent." Nathaniel didn't say a word until they were alone in the elevator. Then he turned to her, his eyes dark with emotion. "You were going to let him kiss you," he said. "And it wasn't a question." "Maybe," Sophia admitted, watching his jaw tighten. "Why?" Nathaniel asked, his voice hoarse. "To provoke me? To make me understand what I'm losing?" Sophia stared at him, seeing the vulnerability behind the anger. "To make me understand what you feel for me." The elevator doors opened at Nathaniel's floor, but neither of them moved. "You want to know what I feel?" Nathaniel asked, taking a step toward her. "I feel like I'm losing my sanity. I feel like every time another man looks at you, I want to mark territory, like a primitive animal." Sophia felt her breath catch. "Nathaniel, no," he continued, now so close she could feel the heat from his body. "You started this provocation. Now you're going to hear me finish it. I spent the night awake, thinking about you in the hotel hallway. I spent all day imagining Diego touching you, kissing you, and it made me realize something." "What?" Sophia whispered. "That I don't care if it's complicated. I don't care if it changes everything at the office. I don't care about anything except having you." Before Sophia could fully process his words, Nathaniel pressed her against the elevator wall, his hands framing her face. "Tell me you feel the same," he murmured against her lips. "Tell me. It's not just me losing my mind. It's not just you," Sophia whispered back, and then there were no more words. The kiss was explosive. Months of tension, weeks of provocation, days of denial, all pouring out in a moment of pure need. Nathaniel kissed her like she was the air he needed to breathe, and Sophia responded with equal intensity, her hands clutching his shirt as if he might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, leaning against each other. "This changed everything," Nathaniel said against her forehead. "I know," Sophia replied, but found she didn't care one bit, because finally, after all the tension and games, she had Nathaniel Carter exactly where she'd always wanted him. The elevator doors finally closed, leaving Sophia and Nathaniel alone in a space that suddenly felt very small and very charged with possibilities. The kiss had broken all the barriers they had carefully built, and now there was no going back. Nathaniel looked at her as if he was seeing her for the first time, his blue eyes traveling across her face with an intensity that made Sophia tremble. His hands were still framing her face, his thumbs tracing soft lines on her cheeks. "Sophia," he whispered, his voice loaded with a vulnerability she'd never heard before. "Are you sure? Because if we go into my room now—" "I know," she interrupted softly, placing her hands over his. "And yes, I'm sure." The elevator reached the 12th floor with a soft ding, and Nathaniel guided her down the hallway in silence, their hands intertwined. Sophia could feel her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. When Nathaniel opened his room door, Sophia was momentarily surprised. It was identical to hers, but there was something more personal about the environment. His jacket thrown over a chair, documents scattered on the desk, to the masculine cologne she'd learned to associate with him. Permeating the air, Nathaniel closed the door softly behind them and turned to face her. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the magnitude of what was about to happen settling between them. "I've dreamed about this moment," Nathaniel admitted, approaching her slowly. "Since that first day when you walked into the conference room, and I saw that fire in your eyes when you disagreed with me." Sophia smiled, remembering that day. "You seemed so arrogant, so convinced you were always right." "I was," Nathaniel said, getting close enough to touch her face again. "But you showed me there were things I knew nothing about." "Like what?" Sophia asked, getting lost in the intensity of his gaze. "Like what it feels like to not be able to breathe properly when someone isn't around. Like what it's like to have someone challenging every thought you have. Like what it's like to love." The word hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning and promise. Sophia felt tears forming in her eyes. "Nathaniel, I love you," he said, the words coming out like a confession he'd been holding on to for a long time. "I know it's crazy. I know it's complicated. I know it will change everything. But I love you, Sophia." Sophia felt like her heart could explode with happiness. "I love you too," she whispered back. "God, how I love you." The second kiss was different from the first, softer, deeper, loaded with the enormity of what they had just confessed. Nathaniel kissed her as if he was sealing a promise, and Sophia gave herself completely to the moment. When they separated again, Nathaniel gently guided her to the balcony. The view of Miami at night was stunning. The city lights twinkling like stars. The dark ocean stretching to the horizon. The full moon creating a silver path across the water. "It's beautiful," Sophia said, leaning against the balcony railing. "You're beautiful," Nathaniel replied, standing behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. Sophia leaned back against him, feeling the warmth of his body, the solidity of his presence. "That audio," she said softly, "changed everything, didn't it?" Nathaniel laughed quietly, the sound vibrating against her back. "That audio showed me that you felt exactly what I felt, but that neither of us had the courage to admit it." Sophia turned in his arms to face him. "And now, what do we do now?" "Now," Nathaniel said, leaning down to kiss her forehead, "we stop fighting what we feel." They went back inside the room, and this time there was no nervousness or hesitation. There was only the certainty of two hearts that had finally found their place in each other. Nathaniel kissed her again, his hands tracing soft lines along her arms, her back, as if he were memorizing every contour of her body. Sophia responded with equal tenderness, exploring the sensation of finally being able to touch him the way she had dreamed. "Since that audio," Nathaniel murmured against her skin, "I can't stop thinking about you, about what it would be like to have you in my arms, what it would be like to wake up with you beside me." "Now you know," Sophia whispered back, her hands exploring the firm muscles of his back through his shirt. The night unfolded like a beautiful, slow dream. They made love with a passion that had been contained for weeks, but also with a tenderness that spoke of the depth of their feelings. Nathaniel was gentle and considerate, treating Sophia as if she was something precious he had waited his whole life to find. Afterward, they lay intertwined. Sophia nestled against Nathaniel's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. The warm Miami breeze came through the open balcony, carrying the distant sound of waves. "What are we going to do when we get back?" Sophia asked softly, tracing lazy circles on his chest. Nathaniel tightened his arms around her. "We'll figure it out together. I know it won't be easy working together, dating, dealing with colleagues' comments, but I know it's worth it." Sophia raised her head to look at him. "What if Mia spreads rumors? What if people say I only got my position because I'm dating the boss?" Nathaniel looked at her seriously. "Then they'll find out that Sophia Alvarez is one of the most talented professionals I've ever met, and that anyone who questions your qualifications will have to deal with me." Sophia smiled, feeling a wave of love and gratitude for this man who not only desired her but also respected her and believed in her. "Nathaniel," she said, her voice becoming serious, "I want you to know that even if things get complicated, even if it's difficult, I don't regret this. Not for a second." Nathaniel pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "Neither do I. Actually, I'm thinking I should send a thank you basket to your friend Luna." Sophia laughed, the sound echoing through the quiet room. "Why?" "Because if you hadn't sent that audio to the group by mistake, we might never have discovered what we felt for each other. We might have kept pretending it was just professional tension." Sophia thought about this, realizing he was right. The embarrassing audio had been the catalyst that forced them both to confront their feelings. "You know what's funny?" she said. "In the audio, I said you were probably dominant in bed." Nathaniel laughed, a rich and genuine sound. "And was I right?" Sophia looked at him with a mischievous smile. "You were incredibly gentle and considerate, not dominant at all." Nathaniel murmured, rolling so that Sophia was underneath him, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "Maybe I need to correct that impression." Sophia laughed, pulling him into a kiss. "Maybe you do." As they kissed again, Sophia realized that everything had changed. They were no longer just colleagues with unresolved sexual tension. They were no longer two people fighting against an inconvenient attraction. They were Nathaniel and Sophia, two people who loved each other and were willing to face whatever challenges came their way together. Outside, Miami sparkled like a diamond necklace, and the ocean whispered promises of new beginnings. And on the 12th floor of a luxury hotel, two hearts had finally found their home in each other. But what neither of them knew was that the real test of their love was yet to come. Starting the moment they stepped back on familiar ground and had to face not just colleagues but also ghosts from the past that neither of them expected to encounter. Sophia woke up, wrapped in strong, warm arms, with Miami sunlight filtering through Nathaniel's room curtains. For a moment, she was disoriented. But then the memories of the previous night came back in golden waves. The confessions, the kisses, the way Nathaniel had whispered her name like a prayer. She turned carefully to watch him sleeping. Nathaniel looked younger in sleep. The tension lines around his eyes softened, his dark hair tousled in a way that made her smile. Part of her wanted to stay there forever in that perfect bubble where they were just Sophia and Nathaniel, without complications from the outside world. "Good morning," Nathaniel murmured, opening his eyes and finding her watching him. "Good morning," she replied, feeling her cheeks flush slightly. Even after the intimacy of the previous night, there was something still new and vulnerable about waking up in his arms. Nathaniel reached out to touch her face, the gesture so tender it made Sophia's heart tighten. "How do you feel?" "Happy," Sophia admitted honestly. "Scared, but happy." "Me too," Nathaniel said, leaning in to kiss her softly. "And hungry. How about we order room service breakfast before facing the world?" Sophia nodded, grateful for a few more moments of privacy before they had to return to the reality of being work colleagues, who were now also what exactly? Boyfriend and girlfriend? Lovers? She realized they hadn't defined that yet. While Nathaniel called room service, Sophia wrapped herself in a hotel robe and went out to the balcony. Miami in the morning light was even more stunning than at night. The turquoise ocean stretched to the horizon, palm trees swayed in the gentle breeze, and she could hear the distant sound of people enjoying the beach. "Breakfast will be here in 20 minutes, Nathaniel said, joining her on the balcony, also wearing only a robe. Enough time for an important conversation. Sophia turned to face him, seeing the seriousness in his expression. About us. About what happens when we go back home." Nathaniel leaned against the railing beside her. "Sophia, I don't want you to think that last night was just a moment. For me, it was the beginning of something real." "For me too," Sophia said quickly. "But you're right. We need to talk about how we're going to handle this at the office." "I won't hide that we're together," Nathaniel said firmly. "I won't pretend you don't mean anything to me, or that this is just physical. But I also understand if you want to keep things discreet at first." Sophia considered his words. Part of her wanted protection, wanted time to get used to this new dynamic before facing colleagues' stares and comments. But a bigger part of her was tired of hiding, tired of pretending. "Nathaniel," she began, but was interrupted by his phone ringing. Nathaniel frowned, seeing the name on the screen. "That's strange. It's Olivia." "Olivia?" Sophia asked, though the name wasn't familiar to her. "My ex," Nathaniel explained, hesitating about whether he should answer. "We broke up over a year ago. We haven't talked in months." A pang of something Sophia preferred not to identify as jealousy shot through her chest. "Answer it. It might be important," Nathaniel answered, his expression becoming increasingly tense as the conversation progressed. "Olivia, what are you doing in Miami?" "What do you mean you're in the lobby?" "No, that's not a good idea. No, I can't." Sophia watched Nathaniel's expression change from surprise to irritation and then to something close to panic. She could hear the feminine voice on the other end of the line, smooth, confident, insistent. "Fine," Nathaniel said finally, running his hand through his hair in frustration. 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes." He hung up and turned to Sophia, visibly disturbed. "Olivia is here in the lobby. She says she's in Miami on business and saw my company listed as a guest. She wants to talk." "Ex-girlfriend showing up out of nowhere," Sophia said, trying to keep her voice light despite the knot that had formed in her stomach. "That's convenient." Nathaniel approached her, taking her hands. "Sophia, you need to know that whatever Olivia wants, it won't change anything about us. Nothing." "I know," Sophia said, and realized she really believed him. "Go talk to her. I'll be here when you get back." Nathaniel kissed her softly before leaving to get dressed. Sophia stayed on the balcony, trying not to let anxiety take over. She trusted Nathaniel, but the whole situation felt surreal. They had barely defined what they were to each other, and already had to deal with ghosts from his past. 15 minutes later, Nathaniel still hadn't returned. Sophia began pacing around the room, her imagination creating increasingly dramatic scenarios. Who was this Olivia? Why had she appeared exactly now? What did she want? When 20 minutes had passed, Sophia made a decision. She dressed quickly and went down to the lobby, telling herself she just wanted to make sure Nathaniel was okay. The lobby was busy with guests, checking out and morning arrivals. Sophia looked for Nathaniel and found him near the elevators, talking to a woman who immediately made Sophia understand why she had been a threat. Olivia was stunning, tall, blonde, with the kind of natural elegance that came from breeding and privileged education. She wore a cream dress that probably cost more than Sophia's monthly salary, and there was a familiarity in the way she touched Nathaniel's arm while talking. Sophia got close enough to hear fragments of the conversation. "Always knew we'd come back to each other eventually," Olivia was saying. "That stupid fight about commitment was just Olivia. Stop." Nathaniel interrupted, but his voice didn't have the firmness Sophia expected. It's not that simple, is it? Olivia smiled, a smile that was pure feminine confidence. Nathaniel, we have history. We understand each other. My parents always adored you. You fit perfectly into my world. Sophia felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. She could see the way Olivia looked at Nathaniel, like he was her property, like it was just a matter of time before he returned to where he belonged. And what was worse, Sophia could see the hesitation in Nathaniel's eyes. Sophia, she turned and saw Diego approaching, smiling warmly. What a surprise to see you down here. I thought you had meetings this morning. I do, Sophia said distractedly, still watching Nathaniel and Olivia. I was just checking something. Diego followed her gaze, and his expression became understanding. Ah, the famous ex, you know her? Sophia asked. I know of her. Olivia Peterson from Peterson Investment Group. Old family. Lots of money. Very influential in the investment world. Diego posed. They dated for 2 years. Everyone thought they were going to get married. Sophia felt like the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. Peterson Investment Group. She'd heard that name yesterday. They were one of the biggest investment groups on the East Coast. Why did they break up? She heard herself asking. From what I heard, he wanted more independence. She wanted more commitment. Bad timing. Diego looked at her with concern. Sophia, are you okay? You look. I'm fine. Sophia lied, but her voice came out strange, even to her own ears. At that moment, Nathaniel looked in their direction, and his eyes widened, seeing Sophia there. He said something quick to Olivia and started walking toward Sophia. But Olivia followed him, her heels clicking decisively on the marble. Sophia, Nathaniel said when he got close, his voice loaded with concern. I thought you were. I was waiting for you to come back. Sophia said, trying to keep her voice steady, but it seems you're busy. Olivia arrived beside Nathaniel, her expression changing from curiosity to assessment when she looked at Sophia. And you are? Sophia Alvarez, Sophia replied, extending her hand professionally. I work with Nathaniel. Oh, Olivia said, shaking her hand briefly, and Sophia could see the relief in her eyes. Just a work colleague, not a threat. Nice to meet you. Nathaniel looked between the two women, and Sophia could see he was trying to decide how to handle the situation. The indecision on his face made something break inside her. Well, Sophia said, forcing a professional smile, I don't want to interrupt your reunion, Nathaniel. Let me know when you're ready to discuss the next steps of the project. She turned to leave, but Nathaniel gently caught her arm. Sophia, wait. For a moment, she saw something resolve in his eyes. A decision being made. Nathaniel turned to Olivia but kept his hand on Sophia's arm. Olivia, he said, his voice gaining a firmness that hadn't been there before. I want you to meet Sophia Alvarez. She's not just my colleague. She's the woman I love. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia felt her heart stop for a moment before racing at an impossible speed. Olivia looked genuinely shocked, and Diego let out a low, "Oh." Nathaniel turned to Sophia, his blue eyes intense and determined. And if anyone has a problem with that, including you, Olivia, then they'll have to get used to it, because Sophia isn't going anywhere. Without taking his eyes off Sophia, Nathaniel leaned in and kissed her right there in the middle of the crowded hotel lobby, in front of his ex-girlfriend and Diego, and anyone who wanted to see. When they separated, Sophia was breathless and completely in love with this man who had chosen her publicly and without hesitation. Well, Olivia said finally, her voice cold as ice. That was enlightening. Good luck to both of you. She turned and left with the wounded dignity of someone who wasn't used to losing, leaving Nathaniel and Sophia alone in the middle of the lobby, still holding hands. Are you sure? Sophia asked softly. Because once we leave Miami, we can't pretend this didn't happen anymore. Nathaniel smiled, the genuine smile she had learned to love. Sophia, I never wanted to pretend, and now everyone knows you're mine. Yours? Sophia raised an eyebrow, but she was smiling. Mine, Nathaniel confirmed, pulling her closer. If you want to be. Sophia looked into his eyes and saw her future complicated, challenging, but full of love and infinite possibilities. I want to, she said simply, and when Nathaniel kissed her again, Sophia realized it didn't matter what awaited them back home. They would face everything together. 3 months had passed since Miami, and Sophia still smiled every time she thought about how everything had changed. The return to the office had been interesting. Mia almost choked on her coffee when Nathaniel and Sophia arrived together on Monday, holding hands, and calmly announced they were dating. The first few days were full of curious stares, muffled whispers, and some hallway jokes that Sophia chose to ignore. But it soon became clear to everyone that this wasn't a passing office fling. Nathaniel treated Sophia with the same professional respect as always during work, but there was a tenderness in his glances that made her heart race even on the most stressful days. They had established some basic rules. No public displays of affection in the office beyond occasional hand-holding, meetings always with doors open when they were alone, and professional decisions completely separate from their personal life. It worked surprisingly well. Sophia had even earned the grudging respect of some colleagues who initially doubted her qualifications, especially after her Brazilian market analysis resulted in a $2 million contract with a tech company. Now, sitting in her apartment on a Saturday morning, Sophia looked at the coffee cup that had gone completely cold in her hands. She hadn't been able to finish even half of it. In fact, in the past few days, the mere thought of coffee made her stomach turn. Must be stress from the new project, she murmured to herself, but part of her mind was doing calculations she was trying to ignore. When was the last time? Sophia stopped mid-thought, her heart beginning to beat faster. She got up quickly and went to get her phone, opening the app she used to track her cycle. 3 weeks late, Sophia dropped the phone on the couch. A wave of panic and something she didn't want to identify as hope took over her. It couldn't be. They had been careful most of the time, but then she remembered that night 2 weeks after returning from Miami, when Nathaniel had cooked for her at his apartment, and they had drunk too much wine and been careless amid the passion and love that still felt new and intoxicating. Don't panic, Sophia said to herself out loud. It could just be stress. It could just be anything. But even as she tried to calm herself, she was grabbing her car keys and heading to the nearest pharmacy. 15 minutes later, Sophia was in her apartment bathroom, looking at 3 different pregnancy tests spread out on the sink. Her hands were shaking so much, she could barely read the instructions. 3 minutes, she whispered, setting the timer on her phone. 3 minutes, and I'll know. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, trying not to look at the sink. Her mind was a confusion of thoughts. She and Nathaniel had never discussed children. They'd only been together for 3 months. How would he react? What if he thought she had done it on purpose? What if he wasn't ready? What if she wasn't ready? The timer went off with a sound that seemed to echo for eternity. Sophia stood up slowly, approaching the sink as if she were walking toward her own destiny. She looked down and felt the world stop. Positive. All 3 tests. Positive. Sophia leaned against the sink, trying to process the information. Pregnant. She was pregnant. Pregnant with Nathaniel's baby. A wave of conflicting emotions hit her. Fear. Joy. Panic. Love. Worry. Excitement. All at once, making her feel like she might faint. She was pregnant. At 28, in the middle of a career that was finally taking off. In a relationship that was still new, despite the intensity of their feelings. Pregnant. The sound of the front door opening made her jump. Nathaniel had said he'd stop by her apartment after the gym to take her to the brunch they had planned. Sophia. She heard his voice from the living room. Love, are you ready? I got us a table at that place you wanted. Sophia looked at the tests again, as if expecting the results to have changed. They hadn't changed. Sophia. Nathaniel's voice was closer now, and she could hear his footsteps in the hallway. Are you okay? You've seemed kind of off the past few days. She quickly gathered the tests, hiding them behind her back. But it was too late. Nathaniel appeared in the bathroom doorway, still wearing gym clothes, hair slightly damp with sweat, with that smile that still made her heart race. The smile disappeared when he saw her expression. Sophia. What happened? You're pale. He approached quickly, his hands automatically going to her face. Are you feeling sick? Sophia looked into the worried blue eyes she had learned to love so much and knew she couldn't hide this from him. She shouldn't hide it. Nathaniel, she began, her voice coming out weaker than intended. I need to tell you something. The worry in his eyes intensified. What is it, Sophia? You're scaring me. Sophia took a deep breath, trying to find courage. I took some tests. Nathaniel frowned, confused. What kind of tests? Sophia, talk to me. Instead of answering, Sophia slowly brought the pregnancy tests from behind her back. Placing them on the sink between them, Nathaniel looked down, and she saw the exact moment he understood what he was seeing. The silence stretched for an eternity. Nathaniel stared at the tests, his expression going through a series of emotions that Sophia couldn't completely read. Shock, definitely, but what else? Positive, he said finally. his voice barely a whisper. Positive, Sophia confirmed, watching every nuance of his reaction. Nathaniel raised his eyes to meet hers, and for a terrifying moment, Sophia couldn't read his expression. Then slowly, a smile began to form on his face, small at first, then growing until it completely illuminated his features. "You're pregnant," he said, and there was a wonder in his voice that made Sophia's eyes fill with tears. "I'm pregnant," she confirmed, a tear rolling down her cheek. Nathaniel pulled her into his arms so quickly she almost lost her balance, holding her against him as if she might disappear. "My God, Sophia," he murmured against her hair, "we're going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Sophia asked against his chest, still not quite able to believe his reaction. Nathaniel pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his hands framing her face. "Happy? Sophia? I'm ecstatic. Scared as hell, but ecstatic." "We're scared?" Sophia asked, a pang of worry cutting through her joy. "Scared because I want to be a good father. Scared because I want to do everything right. Scared because I've never loved anyone as much as I love you. And now there's a little person who's part of both of us." Nathaniel kissed her softly. "But Sophia, there's nothing in the world I want more than to have a family with you." Sophia felt more tears. Tears of relief, joy, pure love streamed down her cheeks. "Even though it's sooner than we planned, even though we're still figuring out how to be a couple." Nathaniel laughed, the sound rich with happiness. "Sophia, I already knew I wanted to marry you. I already knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. The baby just accelerates our timeline. Marry me?" Sophia blinked, her heart stopping for a moment. Nathaniel seemed to realize what he'd said, and for a moment he looked slightly panicked. I mean, if you want, not that you have to." Sophia silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her love and joy into him. When they separated, both were smiling through tears. "It's a yes," she said softly. "To everything, to the baby, to marriage, to the rest of our lives together." Nathaniel lifted her and spun her around, both laughing through tears of happiness. When he put her back down, he immediately knelt down, placing his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "Hi, little one," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm your daddy, and I promise I'm going to love you and your mommy with every fiber of my being forever." Sophia ran her hands through his hair, her heart so full of love it hurt. "Nathaniel," he looked up, his blue eyes shining with tears of happiness. "Yes, that audio was definitely the best mistake of my life." Nathaniel stood up and kissed her again, and Sophia knew that no matter what challenges awaited them, pregnancy, marriage, parenthood, balancing career and family, they would face everything together, because sometimes the best moments in life come from the most unexpected mistakes. And sometimes love finds a way to create a perfect family from the most beautiful chaos. 3 weeks later, when Sophia got sick during an important meeting and had to run out, Mia finally put 2 and 2 together. But this time, when the rumors started circulating, Sophia found she didn't care one bit. After all, she and Nathaniel had much more important things to worry about, like choosing baby names and planning a wedding. The aroma of pancakes and bacon filled the spacious kitchen of the house Nathaniel and Sophia had bought in the suburbs, a radical change from the small apartment where it all began. It was a sunny Sunday morning, and golden rays streamed through the large windows, creating dancing patterns of light on the wooden floor. Sophia stood at the stove, wearing comfortable pajamas and a floral apron she'd received as a wedding gift from Nathaniel's mother. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, some rebellious strands framing her face, and there was a serene happiness in her expression that Nathaniel never tired of observing. "Mommy, I want to help." A sweet and determined voice echoed through the kitchen. Lily Carter stood on a small step stool beside the stove, her curly dark hair, a direct inheritance from Sophia, escaping from 2 small braids. At 2.5 years old, she had inherited her father's penetrating blue eyes and her mother's determined personality, a combination that kept both parents constantly on alert. "Okay, my love," Sophia said, crouching down to be at her daughter's height. "You can help me flip the pancakes." But carefully, Nathaniel watched the scene from the kitchen table, where he was reviewing some documents for Monday's meeting, but his attention was completely divided between work and the family he had built. Even after 3 years, sometimes he still couldn't believe all of this was real. The company had grown exponentially. Sophia was now a minority partner, her expertise in the Brazilian market having opened doors that resulted in million-dollar contracts. She had insisted on keeping her maiden name professionally. "Sophia Alvarez Carter sounds like a law firm," she had joked. But at home, She was simply his wife, the mother of his daughter, his best friend, and the owner of his heart. "Daddy!" Lily shouted, running toward him with open arms. "Look what I did!" Nathaniel immediately closed the laptop, picking Lily up and spinning her around, making her laugh with that crystalline sound that melted his heart every time. "What did you do, princess?" "I helped Mommy with the pancakes, and I didn't burn any," Lily announced proudly. "Wow, you're an amazing chef," Nathaniel said, kissing the top of her head, just like Mommy. Sophia turned from the stove, an amused expression on her face. "Amazing chef? You remember that I burned our first romantic dinner at home, right?" Nathaniel laughed, the memory vivid in his mind. "And you remember that I said I didn't care because I'd rather have pizza with you than a 5-star dinner with anyone else." "Daddy is mushy," Lily declared, making both parents laugh. "Mushy?" Sophia gently corrected, "And yes, your daddy is very mushy." Nathaniel stood up, still holding Lily, and approached Sophia, wrapping his free arm around her. "Mushy about my family," he murmured, kissing her temple. Lily squirmed to get out of her father's arms. "I want to watch cartoons after breakfast," Sophia said with the firm voice that Lily had already learned to respect. "First we eat, then fun." They sat at the table together. Lily in her special booster seat between her parents, chattering about everything and nothing while eating her star-shaped pancakes. Nathaniel and Sophia exchanged glances over their daughter's head, those moments of silent communication that couples develop after years together. "Remember when our biggest worry was whether Mia would find out we were dating?" Sophia said quietly while Lily was distracted trying to stack pieces of pancake. "Now our biggest worry is whether Lily will decide she wants to be a circus performer when she grows up," Nathaniel replied, watching their daughter create an elaborate tower with her food. "She's 2 years old." Sophia laughed. "Yesterday she wanted to be a princess dinosaur." "An interesting combination," Nathaniel admitted. "But achievable." Lily looked up as if she had heard her name. "Daddy, Mommy, tell the story." "What story, love?" Sophia asked, though she already knew the answer. "The story of how you fell in love with the phone and the group and everything." Nathaniel and Sophia exchanged an amused look. Lily was still too young to understand all the details, but there was a sanitized version of the story that had become her favorite bedtime tale. "Well," Nathaniel began, taking on the storyteller tone that always made Lily pay full attention, "once upon a time, there was a very smart mommy who worked with a very stubborn daddy. And Mommy sent a message to the wrong place," Lily interrupted, already knowing the story by heart. "That's right. And Daddy was very surprised when he heard the message," Sophia continued. "But instead of getting angry, he got curious, and then you went traveling far away," Lily added dramatically. "To Miami," Nathaniel confirmed, "and that's where Daddy realized he couldn't pretend anymore that he didn't love Mommy. And then you got married, and I was born," Lily concluded triumphantly, as if she had solved a complex mystery, "and we lived happily ever after," Sophia finished, kissing her daughter's forehead. Lily seemed satisfied with the familiar narrative and returned her attention to the pancakes. Nathaniel reached across the table to take Sophia's hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that had become automatic over the years. "Do you regret anything?" Sophia asked quietly, a question she asked occasionally, as if she still couldn't completely believe her luck. Nathaniel looked at her seriously, considering the question, as he always did. "I regret taking so long to admit I was in love with you. I regret almost letting pride ruin everything. I regret every second I wasted, pretending you were just my employee." Sophia smiled, squeezing his hand. "And I regret being so nervous about that audio that I almost deleted my entire WhatsApp." "Lucky you couldn't," Nathaniel said, bringing her hand to his lips to kiss her fingers, "because otherwise Lily wouldn't be here." "Lily," Sophia called softly, "are you done eating? How about helping Mommy wash the dishes?" Lily nodded enthusiastically and jumped down from her chair, always ready to help with any household task. Sophia got up to start cleaning, but Nathaniel gently pulled her into his arms before she could move away. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" Sophia asked, automatically nestling against him. "For that mistake, for giving me a chance, for building this life with me, for Lily, for everything." Sophia pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "Nathaniel Carter, do you really think I need thanks for falling in love with the most incredible man I've ever met?" "Mommy, Daddy, stop being mushy and let's wash the dishes," Lily shouted from across the kitchen, making them both laugh. "She's right," Sophia said, but leaned in to kiss Nathaniel softly before pulling away. "We are very mushy, and I'm going to keep being mushy for the rest of my life, Nathaniel promised, watching Sophia join Lily at the sink. Later that day, after Lily had been put to bed following an entire afternoon of playing in the yard, Nathaniel and Sophia found themselves in the living room, her reading a book nestled against him on the couch while he channel surfed. "Remember that first night in Miami?" Sophia asked suddenly, closing the book and looking at him. "Like it was yesterday," Nathaniel replied. "Why?" "You said you wanted to wake up with me beside you. It's been 3 years, and I still get happy every morning when I wake up and you're there." Nathaniel turned off the television and turned to give her his full attention. Sophia Alvarez Carter. After 3 years of marriage, 1 daughter, 2 promotions, 3 house moves, and countless Sunday mornings like this, you still managed to leave me speechless. Sophia smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart that first day at the office. "It's good to know I still have that power." "You always will," Nathaniel promised. "Because the truth is that audio didn't just change our lives, Sophia. It showed me that true love can come from the most unexpected moments, the most embarrassing situations, the most perfect mistakes." Sophia leaned in to kiss him, and in that kiss was their entire story. The initial tension, the discovered passion, the built love, the created family. "Definitely," she whispered against his lips. "The best mistake of my life." Outside, the city continued its nightlife. But inside that house in the quiet suburb, Nathaniel and Sophia Carter had found something many people spend their entire lives searching for. A love that had grown from a moment of accidental vulnerability to become the foundation of a lifetime of happiness. And sometimes at night, when Sophia was working in her home office and Nathaniel stopped by to say good night, they still laughed about how it all began, with an audio sent to the wrong place and a boss who fell head over heels for his most challenging employee. Because the best loves, they had discovered, are those that begin with a little chaos and transform into a lifetime of peace, joy, and shared adventures. There are stories born from chance encounters, others from friends who discover their lovers. But Sophia and Nathaniel's story was born from a mistake, an audio sent to the wrong place that revealed truths both were hiding in their hearts. Sometimes it takes a little chaos to discover that love was there all along, waiting only for the courage to show itself. And maybe, deep down, we all need our own accidental audios to find our happiness